So the next thing that I wanted to quiz you on was something we talked about before we started, the NFT space. So the first time that I had someone on my podcast talking about it, he essentially said that he believed it was just a smart way to launder money. But I've come to believe that there's probably a lot more uses in that space than I first understood. So do you want to give us an idea of what you think the primary use of NFTs are?
People who have heard the word NFT related to the fact that there are a bunch of investors who are paying very large amounts of money for sometimes questionable bunch of pixels. Worse, they're paying a lot of money for a sometimes questionable bunch of pixels that you can do right-click, save as image, and not pay for it. And the newspapers are full of both the sensationalism of this, the sex appeal of this, the numbers that are being used. The last sale of a bored-looking ape, a cartoon ape, which is about yay big, sold for $12 million just the other day. NFTs is not about that. That is sort of the pixie dust on top of it, which is dragging the industry along without it. So I'm going to try and describe why I'm excited about NFTs. NFTs represents a new way to own things. And ownership, as we were discussing before you started the podcast a little while ago, ownership is understood by everybody, or even children, that you own this thing, it belongs to you. NFTs allows you a way to describe an ownership in the most flexible and dynamic and infinite of terms. So you can own something today and let your sister own it tomorrow, and then cede half the ownership of it next week. And whenever it's sold again, you can pull some money back. It's just wildly infinite because the NFT is basically a computer program. It's a cryptographic program. It's secure, decentralized, permissionless, all those fun words that you hear around this. But it is a certification of ownership, and the nature of that ownership is utterly flexible. Now, how does this compare with the ownership that we know in the real world? Well, your title deed to your house is not flexible. It says you own it. Sometimes you can get co-ownership in a title deed to a house, but you can't say, I own the house today and I'm going to let somebody own it tomorrow and it's going to come back to me on the third day, because the system's not set up that way. So while NFTs apply to art is fun, NFTs as an ownership reimagined is profoundly important. And so NFTs will end up being applied to everything. One other simple example before I switch off over here. You have assets in your house. I'll give you an example of my house. I have an old Steinway baby grand piano that was my grandfather brought out from Germany a long time ago, and it's worth quite a lot of money. And it sits in my living room and it is played, but I can't put that asset to work. I can't borrow against it. There is no certification of ownership. In the world of NFTs, I can apply an NFT, I can bind an NFT to that piano, and I can go out to a site right now called NFTFi, and I can borrow against that Steinway baby grand. That sort of dead asset management brings potentially trillions into the economy, which was not possible to do before. There are a whole bunch of other examples about NFTs, but I'll stop there. As long as you separate it from the sex appeal of the art stuff and look under the hood at what this could mean to the future of ownership, it becomes profoundly important, perhaps as important as some of that crypto stuff we've been talking about.
So it's like a pawn shop for the internet. No, really, like that's what it seems like to me. No,
but that's essentially what some of these protocols are. It turns out that being able to take loans against assets is profoundly useful in a way that pawn shops aren't. And I think really that's again, we're introducing functionality that just wasn't possible before. But that fixes a lot of problems. One of the problems that NFTs addresses, and this is something that's prevalent both with the provenance of art, but also with ticketing at concerts, for example, is fraud, right? Yeah, if you were going to a sports event or to a music concert, for example, this is a big problem that existed with ticketing before. Is that you'd get counterfeiting, you'd get fake tickets being sold outside arenas, etc. Whereas NFTs basically solve that overnight. There's no way to counterfeit a cryptographic signature. So if I, for example, sold you a concert ticket as an NFT, that would be a cryptographically secured asset that's either in your Ethereum wallet or it isn't. And when you get to the arena, you're scanning your QR code, signing a message to say, I do actually own this thing. There's no way to fake that, right? There's no way to produce a counterfeit of that asset. And so whether you're talking about the provenance of art and who owned it before you did, for example, or whether you're talking about access to an event, that's a massively powerful idea and fixes a lot of problems that existed in the old world in a way that just wasn't possible before. It also opens up a whole explosion of creativity and things that just weren't imaginable before. I think, one of the first big music examples were the Kings of Leon selling an album as an NFT. And really what you were getting was not just ownership of the music, you were getting entrance to a club and a perpetual golden circle ticket at any Kings of Leon concert for, in perpetuity for as long as the band's around. If you have one of those NFTs from buying the album and you show up in a Kings of Leon concert, you scan your Ethereum wallet, sign a message, and you get access to Golden Circle. That kind of connection between artist and community was just not possible before. And so it's opening up a whole world of opportunities that are just, remarkable. It's like this Cambrian explosion that's happening. I think Bored Ape Yacht Club is a fantastic example of when you hand rights over with an NFT, right? So if you buy a Bored Ape, you're not just getting the artwork or ownership of the artwork, you're also getting rights to use that artwork in your own work. And I think that's why Bored Ape Yacht Club has done so well, is because other artists are taking their apes and using them in their own work. And it becomes this kind of, remix or what have you, and brands are using them in their marketing because they're allowed to do that because they're conferred rights for marketing. So really non-fungible tokens achieve so much more than just indicating ownership. Of course they do that too, because that's essentially what an NFT is, right? It's a token that represents ownership of something unique. And there are a lot of lazy criticisms around right-clicking, which just has never made any sense to me. I was at the Louvre last year and I took a photo of the Mona Lisa. Does that mean I've rendered the Louvre's ownership of the Mona Lisa entirely pointless? It's like, what are you saying, guys? I can replicate a magic card or a baseball card and produce an identical copy of it using my HP printer at home. That doesn't mean that the original doesn't have value to somebody who imbues it with that, because that's really what value is for human beings, right? It's something we choose to give an item, a work of art, a passage of music, whatever. It's, of course, none of it makes sense in the greater scheme of things. The universe doesn't compute any of these things. But it's just such a lazy argument to bring to, especially art NFTs, to say, well, I can right click and save it. Yeah, well, you can take a photo of a painting too. You can replicate a statue. Exactly are you saying?
There's one more application of NFTs that bears mentioning here, because it's the one that has got the art community. When I talk about art with a big A, so music and the rest of it, very, very excited. One of the great bugbears of creative people throughout history is that when the creative work leaves their fingers or their mouth or whatever, and it gets sold to somebody, that's the lost revenue they see. So you sell a piece of artwork, and even though there are laws saying that resales should bring a royalty back to the original artist, they are never put into practice and very difficult to prove. So you've got artworks that you get to sell only once. Most artists sell their artworks only once. With an NFT, part of the program that's attached to the NFT, part of the smart contract, the NFT contract can say, every time this work is sold, the NFT does not settle and close until X% of the sales price is carved off into Ethereum wallet and sent back to the original artist, which unleashes billions of dollars that never get back to the original artists throughout history, something one couldn't do previously.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the number of artists in any space, whether that's musicians or painters or anything, where they sell their early work for nothing, and then that ends up becoming the most valuable because it's the least replicated or the least widely distributed, or it's their original thing, and that the artist never sees the fruits of that thing becoming really valuable. I'd never really thought about just how much that must happen to people. You know, like what if Van Gogh's family had been able to benefit off the resales of all his work over the years when he became famous? Yeah. Or someone less tragic that's still alive to get it, you know.
There was a podcast that dropped recently, Freakonomics, which is a 3-part series on art. And Dubner interviews, or he plays a clip that happened in the 1960s at an art opening, in which the artist had sold a painting for very little money, and he had since gotten famous, and now that painting was worth 1,000 times the original price. And he was screaming at the seller, saying, "I didn't get any money from this. How dare you?" And there was nothing he could do. You know, that's the way the world worked back then. It changes with NFTs.
Yeah. So the thing that when you started talking about the tickets being sold outside you can't sell fake tickets basically outside and get away with it in this world. The thing that kept like springing into my mind was the center of the entire GameStop saga that sort of happened last year and is still ongoing was naked short selling, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with what this is. So essentially it's just like making up shares and selling them, saying that you have them on the basis that you're going to go and find them later on, or maybe not even bother. And that would just completely remove that as an option. You know, that this could like revolutionize how transparent company ownership is as well. Like leaving aside the sort of NFT dividend thing that GameStop are rumored to be doing, that it provides like a whole new way for company ownership to be transparent and totally accountable. That you've made me think about this in a completely different way. So thanks for that. I'm gonna have a lot to think about after this interview.
Let me add something over here, which you're kind of edging towards, and maybe you were talking about that, which is DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which is very, very closely connected to the crypto world, and which is very new, probably just a couple of years old as well. And I want to talk about the great fiction of business. The great fiction of a business is that we form corporations using memoranda of incorporation. We use shareholder agreements, partnership agreements, which define who's in charge of the company, who has the right to sell, who has the right to buy, who has the right to get dividends, who has the right to fire and hire. All those documents that sit within business organizations have been structured according to various regulations and laws around the world. That's all fiction. We made that stuff up because it was appropriate to do it, and it made things easier to build a company and for everybody to follow the rules. Decentralized autonomous organizations, which have sprung up all over the place. The best known one, I think you probably know, is when a bunch of guys got together to try and buy a copy of the American Constitution, is where you get a community of interest that springs up, and they make their own laws as to how this community of interest should interact with each other. Do they want a CEO? Don't they want a CEO? Do they want dividends? Do they want the right to hire and fire? Can be structured in an entirely different way than traditional regulations that sit under Delaware in the US or one of the other the centers of governance. And there is one venture capital company in Silicon Valley, I forget which one, who traditionally would give money to a startup and then give a second round to the startup, and then Series A to a startup, and then finally it would go to public markets. It's the standard funnel that they push these companies in. All of them with a lot of those documents about shareholding and governance and boards of directors, etc., who have said we're not doing this anymore. From now on, everybody we're investing in is going to be a decentralized autonomous organization. They're moving the entire investment strategy into the DAO world and away from the traditional VC world. So this is another upcoming set of technologies closely connected to crypto, closely connected to DeFi, partially connected to NFT, depending on circumstance, which is going to be a major game changer. And it's still in the very definitional phase, like the buying the American Constitution example from a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Interestingly, the head of the hedge fund that is at the center of the GameStop thing was also involved in that attempted bid of on the U.S. Constitution.
That's correct. Yeah, the Constitution DAO.
Yeah. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.